Good day, everyone. I'm Joshua Prince, and you're listening to FinChat StartupStories. We interview entrepreneurs about how they got their ideas and how they built their businesses in this difficult South African environment. Joining me today are two entrepreneurs who really understand their social responsibility. They built a business by creating affordable access to bursary applications for the less privileged youth of South Africa. And just to exclaim the importance of the problem these gents are solving, within the first week of launching, over 1,000 applications went through their platform. Their chatbot allows users to apply for university funding from over 40 of Africa's top corporate funding opportunities absolutely free. They recently launched an automated personality and aptitude test at a 90% discount of what the test normally costs. They're going to expand into a wallet, and they're looking into opportunities of creating something similar for job applications and solve that problem for students. But without further ado, Schalk and Sicelo, welcome to FinChat.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, good to be on.
So, Schalk, you guys are going into so much with Xhuma that how can I explain exactly what you're doing? So you guys have started with a chatbot, and through that you expanded into creating personality and aptitude tests for students. But let's start with why, so that we can actually get to what the business essentially does. Why did you start Xhuma?
Awesome. So thanks, Josh. I think Sicelo will most definitely add on to what I have to say. But I mean, initially, Sicelo and I both started off with this concept of trying to create an environment where we really, really increase access to education opportunities in South Africa. And we were both very passionate about the youth and what we could do for the youth. Initially, we spitballed this idea of trying to build an app environment that allows kids at a central place to apply to as many bursaries as possible. Because within our social context, education is a very big issue. And on a tertiary basis, it's extremely difficult to actually find adequate funding opportunities and just to understand what your correct career alternative should be. And off the back of that, we created the initial chatbot environment, where we then decided to actually go towards more of a social media type stream rather than going through the traditional native app route. Because after a lot of research, we figured out that most of our South African population really has WhatsApp installed on their devices. So to really solve for that last mile problem, you need to be in contact with these students on a platform that they regularly engage on.
Yeah, so you basically what it then does is a student can message a number on WhatsApp, and through that process fill in the necessary information to apply for bursaries to go to university. Is that right?
Yeah. So maybe just to chat you through the process of how it works is initially when Schalk and myself sort of realized this problem, I think it was sort of like a two-pronged problem. The first one being that students can't apply for bursaries that they don't know about, and in order to apply bursaries, they all require the same set of information. So it's really counterintuitive that you have to put in the same set of information on all these various different bursary websites. When we could aggregate that. I think that was the first. The second problem is that a lot of these websites are actually quite intimidating. A lot of these students who are actually applying come from environments where they're not necessarily computer literate, or they don't have devices that enable them to efficiently apply, whether it be access to a scanner or to various other different infrastructure that they might need to apply. And so our idea, as Schalk pointed out earlier, was firstly to aggregate this bursary application form where you might have never have heard of a corporate, but you qualify for that bursary. And so if you put in your marks and your information, you would actually qualify for this bursary. And secondly, with it being on a WhatsApp chatbot, it's very intuitive because you're having a conversation. You don't have to worry. A lot of the time when you fill in these things on the internet, it would say, this field is missing, and it won't let you go to the next page. You're thinking, what's wrong? Have I actually applied? Am I missing something? But if it's and you're having a conversation with the chatbot, it's a lot more intuitive and a lot more comfortable. And on top of that, because it's WhatsApp, our API allows us to use your camera to upload stuff. So really, in terms of the infrastructure you need, it really alleviates that. So in terms of the process, how it works, to get back to your point, is you would actually click on a link, and it takes you straight through to the chatbot, and the chat is actually started. And so it chats you through the whole application form, which, dependent on your speed, will take between about 10 to 15 minutes. I think, myself and Scott, when we spoke about this, a lot of guys will say that an application takes whatever 5 minutes or 6 clicks to complete an application, but you first need to download the app. With us, you click straight onto the link and it takes you straight into the chatbot. You don't need to download an app. And so we really find that we're getting to that last mile that a lot of application tools actually don't necessarily have. And so that's how the system is structured, and our thought process in terms of how we were actually looking to solve this problem.
And also maybe to touch on just another point around that, I think our initial dream was to really get to the point where we could identify exceptional talent in South Africa from rural communities, and then find them appropriate funders to even send them to Ivy League universities like Harvard. So for us, like that ultimately remains the vision behind a lot of what we do, and we're really passionate about making a difference like within our society, and really allowing kids to have like an equitable shot at these different opportunities. So as part of that, I mean, it's quite funny when you actually look at a problem statement for the first time, and you sort of unpack the different areas behind it. The first one that Scilla also touched on now was purely to facilitate like candidates applying to different bursaries and understanding their different opportunities. But then on top of that, we also figured out over time that it's really, really difficult for these candidates to truly find like the correct career alternatives for them, the ones that are the natural fit. And it was shocking to see when we did like quite a lot of reading in the space, that if you look at our like success throughput rates, like at tertiary level in South Africa, and you compare that to the rest of the developing world and also the developed world, we're sitting in the 50s in terms of the percentage success rate, whereas a lot of the other developing countries are sitting like in the mid 50s, and your developed world sits like high 70s, low 80s. So in essence, it also inadvertently just identifies this problem where a lot of students are like pursuing this like a type of career at a tertiary institution, but they're not necessarily picking the correct career alternative that's a natural fit for them. So that was sort of our challenge, to say how can we really address this issue, because as part of this process, there's so many additional hurdles for a candidate to get like quality occupational guidance that actually helps them from an aptitude perspective, but also from a personality point of view, and to actually see whether their like chosen occupation could work for them, and that's how that started. And we completely went down that rabbit hole to really try and find like a sustainable solution to address this overall problem of like students actually struggling to be successful like at their tertiary studies.
Yeah, and Schalk, you mentioned before we started recording that actually over 80% of the youth that actually apply through your chatbot actually end up doing the personality and aptitude tests, which actually just touches on that big need for access to both those services, to apply for apply for bursaries at universities, and to be able to know that what I'm studying is actually the right thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been phenomenal to see like how many candidates, since we actually launched that module, have decided to actually write these assessments. But as part of that process, when candidates write these assessments, it puts us in a position where we can truly identify like the talent out there. So in many instances in South Africa and in the rest of Africa, you have exceptionally gifted candidates that might get 60 at school, but the circumstances around like their daily household living, they have to like take care of their families, and they've got additional responsibilities. They potentially have to work a job, and they could only work to perform their schoolwork late at night. And the point is, those candidates truly will be successful if presented with an opportunity, because they understand what it means to take initiative, to persevere. And more often than not, they could be brushed aside purely because of the fact that their marks don't necessarily stack up. But we wanted to identify those diamonds, because that's actually what it's about.
Yeah, and it's such a big problem in South Africa to address, because of the disparity in wealth and disparity in opportunities and access that we have in South Africa, where truly talented individuals are really sometimes just under the mist, and they don't even know what they have access to. And that's what I think is so fantastic of just creating that easy access. And I don't even think that going through WhatsApp was doing it through WhatsApp was just to even address that last mile, but actually to make it easier to access for especially the less privileged youth, because not a lot of people can actually afford phones who can download multiple apps and work and have enough storage or whatever to go through that process in another app, where the whole ecosystem on WhatsApp just makes it even more accessible, and almost data friendly also to do.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the power of the tool that we've built, right? Because basically with one WhatsApp device, the way our chatbot is structured, you can log in and out of the chat and complete an application. And so if you have one WhatsApp enabled device, you can have multiple pupils or
Yes.
users actually apply on that actual device. So essentially, all you really need is a WhatsApp capable device in every single school across the country, and it's that sort of like spark that allows the students to potentially see what opportunities they have access to fund essentially their dreams. So I think for us that was another important point for us when we actually decided to use the WhatsApp API and the chatbot in order to sort of facilitate what we wanted to achieve. And I think that's the power of also of what we've built in that, all you really need is one WhatsApp enabled device and functionality we've given it that multiple users can log in and out, which I think is really revolutionary in terms of how we've actually built and built sort of like this technology on this WhatsApp API stack, which is really pivotal right now in a country like ours, like you said, where we have this massive inequality, and inequality is not necessarily just financial, even technological, in terms of, like you said, people who have access to internet, people who have access to devices, people who have access to information. It's about how do we get that to them.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. But then going forward, obviously, there's so many ways that you can go forward with this and actually build a relationship with all the students who go through your platform, so that it's not just like a one-stop place. And I think that's also the idea of you have, and that's why you mentioned expanding into creating a chatbot or creating a tool for people to apply for jobs as well. How would that work?
Okay, so Josh, on that one, we really believe that at this moment in time there are quite a lot of like alternatives in the market around the way that you could potentially source a job, but none of them actually directly speak to your like your natural aptitude, your natural like cognitive ability, and your personality and your performance over time. And what we truly want to do with that specific part or module is bring all of that together to create a truly innovative assistant that finds you as a student or a grad or a young South African or African opportunities that actually meet your requirements and that will be a natural fit for you. Because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that our population finds jobs that they can excel at and that can be successful in. It's not we sort of grew up in an era, I think, with a lot of young people where we get a lot of fulfillment out of what we do on a day to day. And we need to make sure that what we do on a day to day really speaks to us. So by building this specific module, that's going to be our focus point, is truly to create a next gen job sourcing opportunity where like corporate employers know that when they're actually like hiring these different like employees or presenting these opportunities to them, that there's a lot more behind it purely than just a couple of information fields inputted in a form. There's actual track record behind a specific candidate, and that we can actually show statistically that they're going to be a natural fit for that specific position.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, right? If you look at sort of what we've created with the application tool for bursary providers,
Yeah.
we've got north of 20,000 applications currently as we speak,
Yo.
and so what that really helps us with is a pipeline of information, right? So if
Yeah.
you apply in our platform and then you get your bursary through us. And so your bursary provider will need you to keep updating your marks, your first semester when you're in varsity, in your first year, and then your year-end results, and then, potentially also when you graduate. And so when you apply for a job, all it really is updating this sort of pool of data that we have about you. And based on that, we can give a really colorful picture to firstly your competencies, and secondly to your personality, to whichever job provider is out there, as opposed to you having to start that process again. So I think the way in which this is structured is that I think you use the term a one-stop shop, in the sense that we want to be able to walk this journey through, with you, presenting different opportunities to you, whether it be bursary opportunities currently, in future university opportunities, and as well as job opportunities. So it's really our vision, and the way we strategically thought about this is to sort of be on this journey with you, trying to find different opportunities to get you to the place that you want to be one day.
And I think that's
and also, so sorry, Josh, and also just to add to that, I think what's really important with that is that we've created an environment that works on consensual data sharing, where we protect your information and we want to be that assistant that finds opportunities for you. We don't operate in a manner where we use people's information to earn some sort of revenue off the back of that. I mean, that's not the core of what we stand for. We don't sell any information. We're there to truly put the power back in the candidate's hands, and to find them these opportunities that could potentially change the entire way that they plan their lives.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to allow them to actually create data which is useful for employers and useful to create value for themselves, to just have that data recorded and on a database somewhere. And I really love how Sicelo explained the long-term journey that you're walking, and I think that that relationship that you're building with the users and with the people going through your platform is really something that can last long. And that's what I really think is going to really drive the success of something like this, especially with your idea to expand into a wallet. Can we talk about that some more, that you guys mentioned?
Yeah, so basically, as Schalk mentioned earlier, when you sort of have a problem and you start breaking down this problem, what you tend to do is you start stumbling across many different problems around this problem. So when we, were sort of building the solution for our bursary providers, our bursary providers started sort of just lectures for students. Then once the students have bursaries, actually sourcing different things for them, whether it be accommodation, textbooks, or devices like laptops. And I think a big pain point for them was actually distributing the funds, and for them to actually be able to have an audit trail to say, look, these funds were distributed to this person and they received it and they used it accordingly for what it was meant to be used for. And so we were in an ideal sort of place, building sort of the application chatbot and looking at the technology. And myself and Schalk spent some time in the UK, where we had a lot of exposure to a lot of the fintechs and a lot of the technology that they're using there. And I mean, Europe in terms of fintech technology is far ahead of anywhere else in the world. I mean, if you look at the challenger banks, whether it be Monzo, Revolut, N26, they're literally expanding into America and into Asia, and they're at the forefront of doing what they're doing. So, we really were exposed to what is the best that currently exists currently in the world. And so, we came back and realized that a lot of these things that they were speaking about, there are solutions that exist. And so, we're building a stack of technology, which I think is very useful, for a business case in Africa, and more especially in the bursary sort of setup. So, we've got a committed set of funds to distribute next year. And essentially, we're building this wallet, which, is revolutionary and helpful for the students and for the bursary providers, because off the information that you gave us when you applied for a bursary, you can automatically get a sort of wallet or card that your funds can be distributed into, and you can use as an everyday sort of card, as a normal debit card. But at the same time, the bursary provider can sort of have sort of parameters and controls and ring fence of saying, these funds can only be used for specific things. And on top of that, have an audit trail, and all run off the same system, which they run their applications off, so everything is just aligned. So it really is a brainer for the bursary providers. And off the sort of the technology we've built, it's easy to sort of plug it in and give additional value add. And so that's the thinking behind the wallet is I think we're very fortunate to be in the space that we're in right now, because Africa in general is at a point where it's about to pivot in terms of the payment space. We've got a massive people in on the continent who are unbanked, whose relationship with money is physical. And so, there's no legacy issues in terms, in Europe, the issues they're having now is sort of like morphing the banks into fintechs. But with us, we actually don't have that legacy, because a lot of our population is still unbanked. So we can literally build from scratch something that is useful and fit for use right now. And so, we are at the forefront of that happening with a population which tends to be unbanked, which is people who are coming out of high school into varsity, and create technology which for them is very useful, very innovative, very helpful, and essentially makes their life easier, which is what our company and our vision and our is premised on, to create technology that makes students and people's lives in general easier.
And when are you planning to launch this wallet?
And just another added point onto that, I think when we initially started looking at the problem, like facing a lot of people in South Africa and in the rest of Africa, is that there's a fairly low rate of financial literacy, with people truly understanding how to responsibly work with their finances and truly understanding what their different financial alternatives hold, and actually what the consequences are of those decisions. So as part of what we're building during this process, and part of this wallet launch, is truly to launch a revolutionary product that will completely change the way that South Africans and the rest of Africa actually interact with their money and work with their money, to truly create an experience where people are incentivized to work with their money responsibly, to create generational wealth for their families, because that is one of the biggest issues that we see. And I mean, Sicelo touched earlier about on the whole issue around the unbanked versus banked world out there. And the easiest way to change a physical relationship with money into a digital one is to work with tech savvy individuals. And if you look at tech savvy people, it's largely the youth. So it's really important to change that behavior from a youth perspective, and to show the elders what actual benefits it holds for the entire family. And it's quite strange to see within a family setup, usually when the kids start doing something, it automatically drags the parents and the rest of the family into a specific direction. And that's why, it's really important to offer kids the most innovative products that are out there. Because at the end of the day, that is what can completely shift and change the way that people work with their money. But as part of that process, and to answer your question, so that product is going to market in Q1 next year. We're going to be bringing that across, and it'll completely change the way that you create an account, sign up for an account, work with your money, like share money with your friends, settle bills, budget, save. It'll be like a revolutionary product. It won't look and feel like anything that exists within our market, and we're very, very excited about that.
Diana, I'm also super excited to see what happens, because I think you guys took a very unique strategy, and I don't know if it was your strategy from the beginning, but the big problem with fintechs, especially in South Africa, and like you guys say, the technology take-up is slow. It's difficult to create a product for people, for the older generations who are already banked or so on, to try and convert them from a bank into a fintech or whatever. And just to have the market actually take up a fintech is very, very difficult. But I think the relationship that you're building with this youth, and the specific need that you're almost solving through that relationship, through going specifically after students and allowing the students to access their their funding, and then actually administrating it for the bursar, the people who give the funding. I think it just creates a unique opportunity to solve your chicken and egg problem for your fintech, which I think is really, really fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. Like I think you hit the nail on the head there when you say that a lot of these sort of startups and fintech companies and insurtech and even wealth tech, I think is also the term now, is they'll create sort of some technology, and then they'll try and have this acquisition strategy to try get people to use it, right?
Yeah, but the banks can
And
just make new ones better and quicker.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I think we're quite fortunate in that we've got the users, we've got the committed deposits, and we've got the problem set in terms of what the bursaries want, and so for us, we now can actually build it, with the guarantee that we'll have the users. I think what we've seen
And the
in
guaranteed funding going into it. I mean,
market. Exactly. And I think, we were chatting about how, in the South African market, you'll find there's sort of like new banks, and they all try and try get people to move banks from one bank to the other. And, when you look at the stats in terms of how many people are banked in South Africa relative to how many people could be banked, you quickly realize that, the piece of the pie that people are going after is the wrong piece of the pie. The bigger piece of the pie is the unbanked, and so I think the way in which we positioned in our stalls is quite strategically opportune, in that we can really attract, as Schalk said earlier, firstly, a person who is au fait with technology, and secondly, who typically doesn't have a relationship with a bank yet.
Yeah.
I mean, you might have a savings account, that your parents have opened for you, whatever the case is. But for the most part, people in high school sort of moving to varsity don't necessarily have a big banking relationship. And so I think we are ideally placed to play an interesting role, bearing in mind, sort of the emergence of fintech and technology.
Yeah, and I think on top of that as well, I think fundamentally our strategy and vision with this is completely different to like a traditional banking type product, where we're truly looking at all of the pain points and problems that people have within a traditional transactional experience, and to completely take that away. Because if you look at like all of the other types of products that we've brought to market and that are in the pipeline for us, it's problem centric.
Yeah.
So we look at practical social problems. We try to solve it with technology, and especially for the youth these days, where like we've all reached a stage where we want to be able to get hold of things instantly. We want like better levels of service that have ever been achieved before. And the best way of actually achieving that for someone is to put the power back in their hands, to give them the ability to dictate and to make decisions and choices instantaneously. And that's sort of part of the philosophy behind this is truly to then create products off the back of a problem set, rather than creating a product and then trying to find an applicable problem to apply that set to, as Phil was alluded to earlier.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting, but you guys actually had a very different, almost go-to-market strategy as would normally be prescribed, especially for technology companies, where I normally hear a lot, and actually some of the guests on the podcast have spoken about bringing your product to market as soon as possible with bugs and everything. Where you guys actually took almost a more patient approach, where you made sure everything is in place perfectly before you launch, just because you expected a big inflow, which actually was the result. Um, why did you? How did you actually know that there was going to be such a big market take up and so many applications going through the platform?
Josh, the funny thing is when you actually look at like social problems in South Africa and in Africa specifically, whenever you solve like a socially prevalent problem, people will flock to a specific solution. If the solution actually fits to solve that specific problem. And what we figured out, I mean, off the back, we were at varsity like during the peak of Fees Must Fall, and
Yeah.
we truly understood we felt it within our own community and with people that we knew directly, that it was such a prevalent issue within our society that it needed a solution. It needed like a technology-driven solution to truly assist people, because I think a lot of people were crying out for something like that. So it's funnily enough, like we, it's essentially just proven the theory over time that the problem actually does exist out there. But to be quite honest with you, I don't think we expected as many people to use it.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, when you say guys just go out into the market before they perfected their products, I think we're also very cognizant of what we're doing and the type of data we're collecting. I mean,
Oh yeah.
we've got some of the most like the data set we have is just so rich and so extensive for a population in South Africa that I don't know if anyone else has the data we have to the extent we have it. I mean, we have data of students between the age of 16 and I'd say 25. We have, their age, race, where they stay, what they want to study, their marks, their sort of, what's it called, income, their parents' income sort of tiers. So when you're collecting that type of data, you don't want to go out into market with a product that doesn't necessarily work or that gives people anxiety to say, look, should I be putting my data on a product like this? Does it look safe? So really, when we actually set up to launch this thing, we wanted our users to have a relationship of trust with this product. And so the only way you're able to create that is that, when they actually go onto the platform for the first time, the experience is seamless and as professional as possible. I mean, we are a startup, but you don't want, to create something that sort of looks like a bedroom studios type vibe, like some guys somewhere in the back are doing this thing. We wanted it to really be something that people could trust and was as professional as possible. And so when we launched, I think everyone can speak to the platform in terms of how it works, in terms of our media presence, in terms of our advertising, in terms of our website, in terms of our brand awareness, in terms of how we do things, to really, the brand must be really synonymous with excellence.
Yes.
And so that I think that was also a big part and the thinking behind launching when things were right and not necessarily, I think Reid Hoffman sort of has this thing of saying a lot of the time startups sort of like just throw the plane off the cliff and build it as it's falling.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to have something that works really well when you're doing, the type of work that we are doing.
Yeah, that's a very good point with regards to the data and being able to convey that trust for people to actually give that personal information to you. What actually is your click-through rate, if I can call it that, for where people click on the link to go on the chatbot and actually complete the application?
So it's relatively high. I think with traditional tech companies, you're looking at like a vicinity of trying to get like 20% of a given audience to actually utilize your product. But we
that's even
well
high.
north of, we well north of 50% in
Yes,
terms of people that actually engage with the content and then utilize it. But like as we mentioned earlier, we also knew beforehand that would be like critically important for us to build a frictionless environment for the students. Because at the end of the day, the best marketing you can ever hope for is by word of mouth.
Yes.
To get someone to use it, to love it, and to tell their friends about it, and to get their friends to use it. Because at the end of the day, that's how you build like a trust relationship with a brand, or to build a brand that carries that sort of trust. So for us, that was really important, and we wanted to make sure that we could remove as many of the hurdles as possible to have a super efficient process to get you over the line.
Yeah, it's actually so interesting. And then when you go through and you talk about the aptitude, obviously then that's the first place where you actually like start asking for someone to pay for the test, right? But you also allow users to buy a coupon for less privileged students to actually take the aptitude test. Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so the whole rationale behind that, Josh, is to really create an environment or like an integrated environment that could work to your benefit if you take initiative. So we want to reward people that pursue excellence, that persevere, and that take that initiative at the end of the day. So our entire like technology environment is created around that principle. So I mean, yes, like for a lot of the candidates that come onto the platform and write the assessments and want to achieve like receive their results immediately, they can opt for one of the paid options. But even for the candidates where the price point is still like outside of their parameter, I mean, we worked very very hard to get the prices down as much as possible because these assessments, traditionally, let's call it within the private school world in South Africa,
They're very expensive.
were well north of were a couple of thousand rand, and it was a massive challenge to actually bring the latest available content and tech to South Africa's population on an equitable basis, but at an effective price point. So
Yeah, what
that
do you
was the
actually
first
pay
challenge. And
for a test?
so like the base assessment results comes in at 599.
Yeah.
And we've got like a very detailed assessment for under 1,000 rand that the students can also request, which essentially contains all of the information out there. But both assessments hit the three main pillars in terms of your aptitude, in terms of your personality, and also in terms of occupational guidance. So both of them fulfill or tick all three of those boxes to really assist you. So that's what's created out there and available at the moment. But just around like the couponing solution in itself, um, we want students to take initiative. I think one of the big things that we also trying to position now going forward is to truly get corporate South Africa involved in releasing a lot of these like students' results to them if they weren't able to actually secure a sponsor for themselves. And that's
Oh.
one of the big drivers going forward now.
Yes, well, just go a bit deeper into that. Are you want so a lot of students can't get like their marks or their graduation? Do you want to for those students who actually graduated, you want to try to get funding for them to get their results?
Correct. So
Yo.
essentially, from a tertiary perspective and from a learning point of view, one of the big things in terms of the BE code as well is to spend money towards skills development to help previously disadvantaged people. Now, within the framework, like a lot of the guys that are out there trying to assist people to actually like present them with opportunities where they can offer bursaries to candidates. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to promote skills development that still qualifies for like BE
BE,
type
yeah.
expenditure to improve your skills development rating, but to increase like the footprint in terms of your impact. So if you're sending a kid to varsity for a single year, we could actually be helping more than 100 kids to completely understand the correct occupational choice to ensure that there isn't wasted expenditure along the lines to
Oh.
actually assist candidates. And we want like corporates in specific sectors to participate in that and to ensure that the integrity of the candidates studying within their sector is sound and that our candidates succeed because our success rates are so low at the moment.
Yeah, so you're going after like making sure that instead of just helping one student get through university with funding, you want to get 100 people and try to get that 20%, let's call it 20% success rate for university, try to get up to that to like 60-70% like the rest of the world, just by providing that initial sponsorship of aptitude tests and personality tests to make sure that the people go study the right thing. And how does it actually work with BEE? Do you get the amount of points that you for the amount of money you give, or do you get the amount of points for the amount of people you help?
Okay, so in terms of BE, there's an entire expenditure framework within the code. I'm not going to dive into the detail behind
Okay.
it, but essentially corporates that spend money on improving skills development in South Africa qualify for a certain amount of points within the BE scorecard. So what we're saying is for corporates that actually come along and sponsor these candidates to understand like their occupational choices and where they should be going and finding that correct fit. They could still have that qualifying expenditure in the way that it would be if they were to send a candidate with a traditional bursary, but the impact is
Yeah.
just a lot greater.
Oh,
So what we
yeah.
also try to say, because we are like also like actively invested within the bursary space and ensuring that candidates actually receive funding. I mean, we in the process of actually looking at alternatives of bringing our own bursaries to market as well over time. But we want to make sure that there's a balance between available funding for candidates to go and study, but also ensuring that the candidates that are in the system succeed. because ultimately that's what it's about.
Yeah, and it also would make the effectiveness of bursaries a lot better. I mean, if our success rate of students who go to university and finish go up to 60 and 70%, it would be a lot more effective for businesses to sponsor students, because obviously there's a big risk of giving someone a bursary for a year and then they fail or they drop out or whatever. So obviously it's a whole growing thing that can almost ride on each other. It's a snowball effect, which can be just so. It would be so interesting to see what happens over the next 5 years through this.
Yeah, and I think a big point about this, and it's not, it doesn't only speak to sort of disadvantaged students. There's a lot of us when we are in high school, very few of us actually know what we want to do with our lives. I think,
Yeah,
if you do know, you're very fortunate, and so this speaks to that, to say, look, we can sort of inform you about your personality and sort of attributes that you have that are of particular strength in a particular field, which is very valuable across the board, whether you're disadvantaged or not. But speaking earlier to the sponsorship, we've also sort of come to the fact to say that this is a very expensive product traditionally in the market, and so we've done our bit to try and bring the price down, but at the same time, cognizant of the fact that R1,000 a pop, for many people can still
yeah,
be substantial amounts to raise, and so it could be sponsored, firstly through to various different corporates, and obviously they have the incentive of like Schalk spoke about earlier, the different schemes that they could claim, and it can help them in terms of empowerment. But at the same time, it might be that Josh knows someone who he's mentoring, who he can potentially fund.
yeah,
So the whole ship also works that way. So I think ultimately that is what it's getting to say, look, there's very few people at that age who know. I think if you do know, if you're 18, 16, 17, and okay, I want to be a chartered accountant, I'm 100% sure, and I'm going to be this. You're quite fortunate, but for majority of us, and I mean, it was the same thing for me. I mean, I was fortunate in that I got advice to say, study chartered accountant, and hopefully you can do anything in finance because you seem like you're interested in finance.
yeah.
But for many people, they don't have that advice. They don't have sort of the opportunity to have people around them who can assess sort of what their strengths are, what their interests are, and this sort of speaks to that and gives them an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, no,
And Josh, just another point on that, and I think this is quite cheeky, but what we really want to empower in South Africa or create is a sense of community between people, and to ensure that there's a lot of goodwill. And I think,
yeah,
and a lot of the times we read a lot of things in the news that are quite negative, and that can get us all like down. And we've come through quite a couple of years where there's been so much division between different groups of people, different cultures, different backgrounds. And what we're really trying to do with this is to build like goodwill between people and to bridge that gap, to show people that there are lots of people out there that actually care a lot and that want to ensure that our country succeeds, but that the people in our country are all treated equally and fairly, and that they all get given a proper chance at success. So for us, it was just about creating an environment where something like that could flourish, more than anything else.
Yeah, no, it's really fantastic, and I think we can keep on talking about this forever. So, but we'll have another podcast next year, early next year, when you launch your wallet, and we talk a bit further on this and dive a bit deeper also into your entrepreneurial journey, because we're running a bit out of time. Um, but yeah, thank you so much, gents, for coming on the podcast. And yes, I had such a great time, and it's really inspiring what you guys are doing, and I'm really looking forward to see what the long term effects of the technology that you're building and the products that you're building are going to have on our community in South Africa, and our and yeah, just the commitment and the goodwill, like Scott calls it, what it's going to build up in the next few years. Thank you so much for like what you guys are doing.
Thanks, Josh. We really appreciate it, and it was such a pleasure to be on the show. And yeah, we look forward to keep you guys updated and to share some good news.
Yeah, no, thanks, Josh, for having us. It's always nice to chat to like-minded people who are interested and sort of support us. Because I think ultimately it's not about a startup or a business. Ultimately it's about legacy and creating businesses that make it easier for people to prosper. And so, through your platform and other different sort of digital platforms, you guys sort of spread that awareness. And so I think we're appreciative to people like yourselves who feature us and sort of give us social capital, which is very important to us. So thank you so much for having us as guests.
Fantastic. That was Sicelo and Schalk from Xhuma Tech. Please go check it out. It's a fantastic platform. Thank you guys for listening to this first season of FinChat Startup Stories. We'll shoot off next season early next year, just to give me some time to finish up my studies at university. Thank you guys for all the support, and I'm really looking forward to next year. All the best. Bye-bye.